All right, welcome back everyone. In this video, we are going to take a look at the brand new Sony 85mm f1.4 G Master version 2. This is the brand new version of what I will say is probably one of my favorite lenses in Sony's lineup. The original 85 was really good, and this is a trend that we're starting to see with Sony probably over the last year or two, where they're taking some of the older models of lenses, improving them, and re-releasing them as version 2s. And I have to say, I've really enjoyed using this lens over the last couple weeks. Sony was nice enough to send me a copy to preview and to make this video with, and so I want to share a lot of that with you in this video today. So the original version of the 85mm G Master was a really good lens, but it also was released in 2016, and Sony have done a lot in between 2016 and today in terms of technology with not only autofocus but also in optical technology. And so I think that's why we're starting to see this with a lot of their lenses, where they're able to make improvements of things that they couldn't do early on that they are able to do now. And like the other lenses that we've seen redone, so for instance the 24-70, the 16-35, Sony will still have the original 85mm f1.4 available, so if you prefer that, you'll be able to get it at a cheaper price. And of course, the new one kind of takes the same price point that the old one had. So for me, image quality is probably the most important aspect of anything that we're doing, but I do want to take a look at some of the physical changes to the lens as well. So the first thing that you're going to notice is the size is very similar, but when you handle this, the new 85mm G Master is about 20% lighter than the original. It's also way better balanced. One of the things that I didn't like about the original is not only was it a big lens, but it was a little bit chunky, and this was very prominent in the way that it felt in the hand and also in the way the autofocus performed. The new version has dual XD linear motors in it, which is in line with the lenses that we've seen from Sony more recently. And the first thing you're going to notice with the autofocus is much faster, much quieter, and much more accurate. And as much as I liked the optics in the original lens, the autofocus did have issues. It was a little bit clunky and a little bit slow compared to what Sony's able to do now in their current lens lineup. The optical design in this lens is completely different than the original. The original had 11 elements in 8 groups, and the new one uses a design of 14 elements in 11 groups. 2 of these elements are extreme spherical elements, and 2 are extra low dispersion elements. And so this is largely made possible with the nano AR2 coating that we first saw on the 12-24mm GM zoom lens. As with all G Master Prime lenses, the new 85 obviously features a physical aperture ring. The lens also features switches for manual focus, autofocus. You have declickable aperture, and it also features an iris lock switch for use in video. So again, if we're looking at why is Sony going to update a lens, well, obviously we have technology that's going to enable sharper image quality, especially wide open, and that's something that's very important with all modern lenses. Bokeh is obviously going to be subjective, but personally I found this lens to be an excellent performer with really good contrast, really good color rendition. It's a really good lens. I think the original was good, and I think this one, for me at least, is just a little better even. Now, another big reason for the update is when you consider 2016 and where Sony was then and where they are now, Sony is offering a lot of options for video production, and I think they've gotten really serious about that, especially with E-mount when you look at the FX system of cameras. And so video is really important. The focus breathing is really well controlled in this lens, and the autofocus, as I mentioned before, is exceptional, and so I wouldn't think twice about using this as a video lens. It really is good. Okay, so I want to look at some images on screen. I want to point a few things out, but when you consider Sony's lineup and when you look at their high resolution cameras, so the current one being the A7R, also we have the A7CR, we're talking about 60 megapixels, and I don't know where we're going to go in the future with that. 60 is certainly plenty for just about anything, but the more micro rendition that you can get, we call this microcontrast. Typically, it's when you look at the line pairs on an MTF chart and you see how high it can resolve when you really get into those fine details. And I have an image here that I want to look at, and obviously this isn't a really exciting image, but you do see fibers on here in the sun. And when I zoom in, and you can see on this image, like, you know, you're getting dust and dirt in the window and all kinds of things that you don't even see that are there when you're zoomed back out. And so that's what we refer to typically as microcontrast, and especially in brighter areas, like when you get into where the sun's hitting, it retains a lot of that detail exceptionally well. Another thing that I want to point out in a lens like this, in addition to detail and resolution, is obviously this is a portrait focal length, and the out of focus areas are also equally important. And I want to make a comparison to Leica here, because this is something that Leica consciously do with their lens design that they talk about quite a bit, is when you have a high area of contrast where stuff resolves to a very fine level, and then as soon as that falls off, they control that fall off, so you have a really rapid one. And so, like, for instance, in this image, and you can see obviously at a close-up distance like this, I have a pretty quick fall fall off in terms of focus. But if we zoom in here, you can see we've got a lot of detail, a lot of fine detail. And if we move over here to where this curtain is starting to fall out of focus, you can see that it happens really quickly. That's something that's going to make a lot of sense when you look at portraits, and I've got a couple that I'm going to show you in a second. And I think it's something that, you know, from a visual standpoint, it's something that I look for in a lens. I think it's an important characteristic, for me at least. So looking at portraits, I want to show you a comparison here actually of two different lenses. So what I did is I took the 85mm G Master Mark II, and I actually compared this with a much different lens on a much different system. This is the Leica 75mm Aposummicron SL. So this was done on a different system, and I realized that, and that's why I did these in black and white, just because I want to show you the detail. And I wanted to show you the detail between those in focus areas and that extreme fall off to what's out of focus, because it's something that looks really beautiful on a portrait. Now, you might argue, and I'm sure some will, that the 90mm probably would have been a better example for something like this because it's a little bit closer to the 85, but I didn't have access to the 90, so we're going to use the 75. So it's 10mm difference, and I did move in a little bit to compensate, but the 85mm G Master is on the left, and the Leica lens is on the right. This is the 75mm, and it's an f2.0 lens, so I know that the apertures aren't exactly the same, but you can see that the look that each one of these lenses is pretty similar, and I think this is a testament to what Sony are doing. Now, the Leica is in a completely different playing field because you're talking about a lens that is astronomically expensive in many cases. We're talking about a 5,000 lens compared to a lens that comes out at just under 2,000. So that right there makes the comparison a little bit null and void to see that Sony are producing something that is on this level. And so that's what I wanted to share with you in this video. And again, I just had a short amount of time, a couple weeks with this lens, shot as much as I could with it before I had to send it back. I will do a more in-depth review and talk about this some more down the line when I get a chance to use this lens some more, but I would love to know what you guys think. So drop me a comment below. I will see you guys in the next video. Until then, later.